Welcome to the Natural History Cupboard. Come on in.
And welcome back to the Natural History Cupboard podcast, the place where the weird and wonderful parts of the natural world come together. I'm your host, Gareth, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Aaron. Aaron, what have you been up to?
I've been a bit lazy this week because it was my birthday.
Happy birthday for the other week.
Thank you very much. We did do something really cool, though, which is natural history oriented. We watched the planet alignment.
Oh, yeah. Did you get any special powers?
I did not. No,
Yeah.
I did not. But I did get like a couple nice photos. The photo that is coming up behind us now is it was taken on an iPhone with no special like equipment or anything.
Cool.
But you can see in the image in the bottom left quarter you can see Mars, and in the kind of upper right quarter you can see Jupiter. So that's really cool.
Nice. I didn't actually get a chance to like properly sit and watch it, but I did see Mars.
What was brilliant was like I always tell people that stars twinkle and planets don't. But I say people were like, are you sure you can see that they're different colors? I'm like, yeah, I can see that they're different colors. But this time, because you had the 5 planets that are visible with the naked eye, which is Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, they're all out at the same time. Like the people around me could see that they were different colors, which was nice. And we had a pair of binoculars, which I managed to zoom in on a couple of planets and get a bit more definition on them, but not for a photograph. Unfortunately, I couldn't see the ones that weren't visible. Possibly the binoculars weren't powerful enough, but I think equal to that was that when you're looking at when you're looking at one of these planets and you can see it with your eyes and you can point to it, when you put the binoculars to your eyes, it's like having to find it again a little bit.
I'm gonna blow your mind here. I struggle with that because if I want to look through a pair of binoculars, I'm gonna take those off. So I'm looking at hang on, wait.
Memorize the head position and the eye position.
Quick. So yes, I do know what you mean.
Yeah. So without like actually looking up the coordinates, which on Exmoor is quite difficult because there's no internet.
Yeah.
It was nigh on impossible to try and track, but we knew that they were there. We knew that they were lined up. It was on my birthday, so it was all very special, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Being up there watching Starlink satellites going across.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, I know, but it's cool to see. The coolest, obviously, the highlight is seeing the planets align. Secondary to that is the meteors, because you get meteors throughout the year.
Yeah.
A planetary alignment is extremely rare.
Yep.
But it is cool to see like some like satellites up there.
Yeah. I'd be more impressed with the ISS.
The ISS is really cool, but I think that came over potentially in the morning, and we weren't out at that time. Yeah, but still very cool night of stargazing.
Well, I don't think I've done anywhere close to that. I did some science experiments.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We myself and my son, he got a science kit. He really seems to like doing little experiments and things. So I'm hoping I could see him becoming like an engineer in the future.
Oh yeah,
which fair enough, not the worst thing in the world to go into. I'd prefer natural history myself, but he got like a little science kit, one of these ones it comes with a few different powders and things, and you can make them. Have you ever done the one where you get a crystal tree, grow a crystal tree?
Yeah, not a crystal tree, but me in Africa grew a glow in the dark crystal.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
Basically, that's one of those ones where you get the cardboard and it's in the shape of a tree. You put it in a little dish that's got the solution in it, and then it evaporates and you end up with this sort of crystal tree forming. So yeah, that went well. I mean, it was very small. It's like most of these kits are. You're like, oh, okay. So as soon as the tree had dried out, the weight of the crystal things just made it fall over. So I was like, well, that was good. So I'm gonna look at getting the chemicals themselves to do a bigger version, because they're not hard to obtain chemical sort of things. We're
No.
not talking, going and looking for thermite or anything here. So yeah, so I might try and make a bigger version, but there's loads of other ones in that same kit.
Apparently, if you use food coloring or something like that, you can color the crystals too.
Yeah, I mean, this one actually seemed to have coloring, I think, impregnated into the paper. So as it went through, it picked up the coloring on the cardboard, because you ended up with the green, yellow, and sort of red colors on the crystals. But apart from that, you know what? No, not really much else.
Well, that in itself is fascinating, because the whole process of crystals forming in the earth is a really interesting science in itself. And it is natural history. So
yeah, I suppose chemistry, I suppose. Yeah, which everything's chemistry. Oh well. Should we move into the news?
let's do it.
It's the news!
Right, well, we're into the news for this week. Aaron, take us out.
I think I've got quite a lot of good news this week. And the first one comes to, it does have a bit of a sad ending if you actually look into it, but it's good news generally. And my first article comes to us from discoverwildlife.com. And the headline is, "My first reaction was disbelief. Spotted hyena seen in Egypt for first time in 5,000 years.
So it was a spotted hyena.
Yeah, they spotted a spotted hyena, yeah. So yeah, a spotted hyena was observed in southeastern Egypt, some 500 kilometers away to the north of its known Sudanese range.
Yeah.
Researchers suggest that the change in local climate is likely what has enticed the animal to return to its former range. Unfortunately, for whatever reason that it went on this adventure, the animal was eventually killed in retaliation for livestock predation. So, like I said, a bit of a sad end, but potentially good news that there's now kind of individuals starting to scope out parts of their original territory.
Answers the question, why would a hyena walk 500 miles, but it didn't walk 500 more? It's a terrible joke, I know. More of those coming up.
Oh dear.
I'm going to start with sad news this week. Really infuriating, actually, because I was listening on the way over here to a political podcast that I listened to that was talking about a bill in the UK Parliament coming up for its first read, to basically called the Nature and Climate Bill, to try and drive forward legislation that is more up to date for the UK to help nature, as in individual animals and things like that, but also realize that we have to fight climate change and not damage either or, not an either or situation. This bill had cross-party support from the Greens, the Lib Dems, even some Tory and Labour ministers were behind it as well. Unfortunately, in getting here and then just double checking the sources, so on the 24th, which was 3 days ago, this proposed law failed to meet its first reading. So it has basically been killed before it even really got off the ground, which is incredibly annoying. The government won a motion of 120 votes to 7 to end the debate on the bill, meaning that it will not return to the House of Commons until July, and it also means it's unlikely to become a law. This climate change and nature bill would have, this climate change and nature bill was proposed by the Lib Dem MP Ros Savage, and however, she said she would not push for a vote on the bill herself, and having agreed to work with ministers to find a way forward. It's really sad at this point that we can't make that drive to really hammer home things. And unfortunately, just yet again, another sad indictment on this current government, which doesn't seem to be doing enough for nature.
Like I said, they're the lesser of two demons, but make no mistake, they are both demons.
They just seem to be the, well, I've got to get up and like get a pen and things. Let's just stay with what we've got.
They're a bit impotent because they've come in everyone was raging about the Tories, but now because of recency bias, everybody seems to have forgotten how terrible the Tories are because of all the nonsense that Labour
But they could be
putting
doing
everyone through.
so much more.
They could be doing so much more, and I just wonder if they just think, we'll take this election
Don't
as a
rock
win.
the boat.
We won't rock the
Yeah.
boat because we know we're going to be out at the next election. Because if America is anything to go by, and if current kind of the kind of political zeitgeist of the UK is anything to go by, I think we're looking at a reform government
Which
next
is a
time.
sad indictment.
Yeah, that is
in my mind, that would give me 100% reason to go, right, if this is going to happen, we are going to change as much as we can before we before we go off the edge. If we're going to do this, let's do it properly. Let's take the handbrake off and just do it.
Yeah, if the right way,
you can't
far
please
right wing
everyone.
are gonna get in anyway. You may as well just
make the change.
If breathing is what upsets the far right, we'll just make all the changes.
Yeah. And if Keir Starmer, I know you're clearly listening to this podcast, because clearly you're clearly listening to us. Do it. What have you got to lose?
Do it.
Yeah, do it.
Do what must be done, Lord Vader.
Feels like the Sith are in power, but hey ho. Moving on.
Certainly across the pond it does. Yeah. So my next article is much happier. It comes from El Adelantado. And the headline is, the largest continental mammal has reappeared after more than 100 years, and scientists are calling it a historic event. So for well over a century, there's been extinction fears surrounding the species, but cameras set up by the State Institute of Environment for Rio de Janeiro have managed to capture images of South American tapirs, 3 of them, including a mother and calf duo, which is fantastic news, in the forest of Canhambebe State Park. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Better than I'd have done.
The species has not been seen since 1914, which, for the sake of time reference, is the year that World War I started. So it looks like it's reappearing right around the time we might be looking at another World War.
Go back into hiding.
Yeah. For those of you who are also tracking extinctions, 1914 was the year that the last passenger pigeon, a bird named Martha, died in captivity.
And what Superman was actually shouting about in that film.
Yeah.
So, on a slightly better note, this is from Sky News, actually, which I was very surprised that they were reporting anything good with nature. I don't know why. I always have a bias against them, I suppose. But thousands of critically endangered tortoises in Madagascar have been rescued after they were swept away from their sanctuary and left swimming for their lives in recent floods. 12,000 radiated and spider tortoises were housed at the Lavolo Tortoise Center after being rescued from wildlife traffickers. So they've already had a pretty rocky start, to say the least. But earlier this month, Cyclone Dekeldi hit the southern part of the Indian Ocean, causing a flood at least a meter high inland.
Wow!
So quite a bit of flooding. Sanctuary staff and locals and even police officers joined together in the rescue effort, making makeshift rafts for the tortoises to float on. Heri Raza Fimamon Jirabi, and I really hope I pronounced that well. I've got the longest name to have pronounced there for today.
That's probably the hardest name that has been tried to be pronounced on this podcast over the last 5 seasons.
So the director of the Turtle and Tortoise Survival Alliance, which runs the sanctuary, said they were hopeful that they'd rescued more than 10,000 of the tortoises, but they still had to do an official count. But the pictures that came with this were lovely, of these tortoises basically on little makeshift rafts as people are floating them around. Radiated and spider tortoises are some absolutely gorgeous, critically endangered tortoises.
Yeah, they are cool. So my next article comes to us from The Connexion, which I believe is a French paper. And the headline is "First Otter for Over a Century." Sorry. And the headline... And the headline is First Otter for Nearly a Century Captured on Normandy Camera.
I would say it's a French headline, a French newspaper. If
I
it's
believe so.
looking at Normandy, yeah.
So in similar news to the tapir story, French conservationists are celebrating a biodiversity milestone as cameras snapped images of an otter in the village of Charleval. I hope I've pronounced that correctly as well. The village is in the region of Normandy, an area that hasn't seen otters since 1932. So quite a while, yeah. The observations were recorded where two rivers meet in a location that has been the target of extensive efforts that have been made to basically undo the damage through rampant road development and other kind of nature encroaching activities. Again, just for time reference, 1932 is the year that Amelia Earhart became the first woman to make a non-stop flight across the Atlantic on her own.
Random history facts with you there. Yeah. I can say that having driven through Normandy, it's a lot of farmland.
Yes, it is.
A lot of farmland and a lot of canals and ditches that are between different areas. Basically, sort of meaning, I suppose, that there is a lot of space for the otters to be there. And just like in parts of the UK, like Norfolk and sort of Suffolk and even Somerset, you've got very similar sort of habitats where it's farmland, drainage ditches, and the otters will quite happily live in those places.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's good to see. My final one is from the BBC, and it's Stinky Bloom of Corpse Flower enthralls thousands. And this is the story of Putricia, the Titum arum. We've talked about Titum arums before on the podcast. Has been placed behind a velvet rope at Sydney's Royal Botanical Gardens. It's even got a webcam set up that was live streaming the flower as it was getting ready to bloom. You probably wouldn't have been able to smell very much down the live stream, but more than 8,000 simultaneous viewers from all over the world viewed in on the Thursday that the flower was opening as its appearance started to change. So, yeah, another reason that Titum arums are such a cool flower. I think that's one we'll have to cover as a creature feature, because they're really cool. I've only grown the voodoo lily, which is a smaller species. But yeah, they're really cool.
Yeah, they were cool. I remember when you reported on one in the UK. And
Peyton Zoo, I think.
I think so. We were fascinated by looking at it and looking at its development.
Yeah.
But that just about wraps it up for the headlines this week. So I'm going to dive straight on into the main article. And this week, hopefully, another conservation success, as Yahoo News Online reports on the growing population of water voles gracing Britain's waterways. The headline reads, Scientists thrilled by essential mammals' progress in the UK. Reversing their historic loss needs to be a key focus. So when we're talking about rewilding, we often focus on the rewilding of beavers and pipe dreams like the wolves, or more recently and more controversially, the lynx. But in doing so, we often forget about the little guys. Water voles being an extremely important one, because though diminutive in stature, they play the role of ecosystem engineer at the micro level, moving seeds to spread plant life, encouraging growth in the riverbanks, and in doing so, helping to bolster the soils against erosion during flooding. And not to mention, they remain a key entry on the menus of many a native predator. But distribution declines, polluted waterways, by the way, a special thanks to the Conservatives for that one, and invasive predatory American mink have driven our water voles to the very edge of extinction. The result of which is not just a drastic decline in the species itself, but the loss of predators who consume it, plant diversity, and riverbank integrity, which means worse flooding. Fortunately, there are ongoing conservation efforts in East Anglia, Hertfordshire, Oxfordshire, and Yorkshire to see the animals return to their native habitats. Combating the aforementioned threats has been key to getting to this stage, but the real linchpin in all of this has been a project to eradicate the American mink from the few wild places that we have remaining in Britain. So whilst progress has been made and definitely deserves celebration, there are still more hurdles to vault and many miles to travel before we can say that the water vole has, like, it's got
Returned.
its foothold back. And they are a wonderful animal. I don't know if you've ever seen water voles in person, but
I've gone looking for them. I've seen signs of them, but I've never seen one.
I've been very lucky. Firstly, I believe my brother sent photos of some water voles a little while back, but I have very vivid memories of when we lived in East Anglia, near a village called Dedham, and my mum used to point out that there was like an antique shop or something. I'm sure it was an antique shop, but just outside, there's a little kind of water course running alongside the road, and you cross a bridge to get into this what I think I remember as being an antique store. But in that waterway, there was always what we called water rats.
Yeah.
And they are waterfalls. And so I got to see them quite often with my mum. And my mum was always, she's the one that first showed me them and was always the one that pointed them out to me. They're really cool.
Yeah. I think obligatory. Did you, when you were looking this up, did it have the obligatory mention of Ratty from Wind in the Willows?
Do you know what? It didn't. I was actually kind of impressed that they managed to steer clear of any
Something
reference
you
to
can
Wind in the Willows.
guarantee in the British press is if anyone ever mentions water voles in anything, they have to include Ratty from Wind in the Willows. Yeah. It's the only way that apparently people in the UK can understand what a water vole is. But I think they're fascinating creatures. But the main driving thing has been otters coming back, because the otters do eat water voles.
Yeah,
they do naturally eat them. But the difference is between an otter and a mink. Mink are much smaller and can get into the water vole's burrows to eat them, whereas an otter is too big to get into their burrows. So they may catch the odd one out in the river course, but they'll never go into the burrows to get to them.
But also, and there's a bit of crossover here with the whole relationship with pine martens and grey squirrels and red squirrels. The water vole has evolved alongside the otter in that constant evolutionary arms race. So yes, whilst they are a prey item for the otter, they also can escape the otter too, other than the fact that the otters are too big to get in their burrows.
But there's also the fact that otters like the taste of mink.
I was going to bring that up, yes.
So all of the different things that I've seen where people have talked about humane mink traps to basically catch them, to get rid of them.
To catch them alive.
Yeah.
And keep them that way.
Basically becoming a floating lunchbox for an otter, which is stronger, larger, and will bite through the cage to then eat the mink inside.
Yes.
So proving that if you bring back the native predator, the big dominant animal in that place, it controls everything. So, in the areas where there are otters, there are less mink and potentially more water voles.
Exactly.
So,
and the bleed or the crossover with the squirrel situation.
Yeah.
Where the red squirrel's natural predator, the pine marten, where the pine marten thrives, so too does the red squirrel, because the grey squirrels are hunted very easily.
Yeah.
And that gets rid of that awful disease that can be passed on to red squirrels.
Yeah.
So again, as you said, it just shows how native ecosystems are constantly in balance. You take something out like like an otter or a badger, fox, or wolf, and the whole thing falls down. Boom, as K2SO would say.
Well, there you go. As Ian Malcolm would say.
Life will find a way.
Exactly. So before we just descend into doing Ian Malcolm quotes, let's head into our creature feature.
Let's do it.
It's the creature feature.
So we're into this week's creature feature. Aaron, if I was to ask you to name a more flamboyant looking animal, you would probably, along with most people, go in the direction of parrots or tropical fish, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably flamingos, actually.
Yeah?
They're pretty flamboyant.
What if I was to ask you to name a deadly and flamboyant animal? Flamingo with a machine gun?
Cassowary?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're pretty flamboyant. Well, one group of flamboyant yet incredibly deadly animals should be included in that same group, and that's the subject of today's creature feature, and that is dart frogs, poison dart frogs. And that's these, well, quite famous and small amphibians, most not getting above 8 centimeters or 10 centimeters in length. But these tiny creatures pack a punch, not only in their colors and looking absolutely amazing, but also in their toxins that give them their specific dart part of their name. There's one specific kind of dart frog, though, that I did want to focus on kind of in this feature. However, I have opened it up and made it slightly more varied due to some help from the wider community, which I'll explain about as we go on. But it's led me to add more of a generalized vibe to it. But there are some species, or a specific species, I did want to focus on initially. And let's have a quick look at that one. And that's the bumblebee dart frog. These stunning little black and yellow frogs are, well, hard to mistake for any other animal, really.
They're gorgeous as well.
Really, really pretty markings. And as you can see, they are covered in these stunning colors to, well, act as a warning, really. They are nature's definition of mess around and find out.
I like how you made that PC.
I've toned that down a bit, but yeah, basically they are the living embodiment of that very phrase, because they employ what is known as aposematic markings on their body, or aposematism, which is essentially advertising the fact that you are not worth messing with, because you are deadly in some way, shape, or form, whether that's you've got spikes, or you are venomous, or in the case of these animals, you are poisonous and incredibly toxic. So you advertise that fact, so it's not really worth messing with. So much so that some other species of frog have actually taken to imitating these colors to basically get the benefits, but without any of the having to produce toxins in your skin situation. A lot of other frogs, as you probably might be aware, tend to hide. They're quite plain in color. Some of them are incredibly good at playing camouflage. I've worked with species of frogs that have pretended to be bird poo. Vietnamese mossy frogs, for instance, they have stunning patterning all over their body that just blend them in so well. It's almost impossible to spot them if they are hiding. But aposematic coloring is the same sort of thing you might be aware of, and you've probably seen it on either bees or wasps or lots of other animals that basically stand out and advertise the fact that they're not worth fighting or touching. It's not just black and yellow creatures. It can be black and white, black and red.
I was going to say coral snakes.
Yep. They all stand out and give you that obvious warning that they're not worth messing with. And most animals see that and are smart enough to go, yeah, fair enough. I won't mess with that.
Sometimes what's even more interesting than the animals that are actually dangerous and using that camouflage is the ones that are using that camouflage and mimicking the animals that are actually dangerous. Like hoverflies come to mind, and milk snakes, that kind of thing.
True masters of, well, I wouldn't say camouflage or disguise.
Mimicry.
That would be the word. True masters of mimicry, yeah. You might be looking at some of the video footage that I'm putting up of some of these bumblebee dart frogs. Now, in fact, the video footage is of some of the dart frogs that myself and Drew work with. One of these particular dart frogs is called Clyde. And in fact, Clyde is the image for this week.
Right.
He is the image that Drew has gone with. And the way that we tell Clyde apart from the other two dart frogs in the tank with him is that Clyde has a little Mickey Mouse logo on his head.
Yeah.
He's got 3 little black dots on his yellow head that look like the Mickey Mouse ears. But yes, that's this week's image is basically Clyde the dart frog. So there you go. It's something that I don't think we've pointed out many times, but a lot of the artwork is often based on animals that either you or myself or Drew have some sort of connection to.
We've either worked with or known in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So where do these fantastic little dendrobates live? So I say dendrobates because that is the group that they belong to. Dendrobates leucomalus is the bumblebee dart frog. It's found in the northern part of South America, most notably in Venezuela. It's also found in parts of Guyana and Brazil, and the extreme easternmost part of Colombia. So a sort of strip across the northern part of South America. This amphibian is normally found in very humid conditions, sort of down on the rainforest floor, close to fresh water usually, and in the leaf litter. The forest's basically keeping that humidity in close. So they'll be in amongst logs and all those things down close to the ground. In the dry season, though, they are known to congregate in damper places, such as under rocks and fallen trees to, well, basically keep themselves moist and humid, because being an amphibian, they can dry out. So climate change being one of those things that can actually affect where these guys are capable of living. Areas of the rainforest are drying out an awful lot more than they should be. But we'll get to threats on these guys in a minute. So where do they get the name and how do the toxins work? Well, like I say, they are the living embodiment of mess around and find out, because the dendrobate skin secretions contain a variety of different lethal toxins, from pulmotoxins to batrachotoxins, and there are a variety of other alkaloid toxins that are found in there. Now, not all alkaloids are toxins. They can be in the right concentration, but nicotine and caffeine are both alkaloids, and those are relatively harmless in much smaller doses. There are several different toxins found in their skin. Now, some of the ways that some of the way that these toxins can actually affect you is through nerve control, muscle contractions, and actually cause locomotion difficulties. And they can stop your breathing, basically. Your heart stops and your chest can't move, and you basically suffocate to death. You are silly enough to be poisoned by these amphibians. But to put it into perspective of just how lethal these toxins are, 0.2 of a microgram of the toxin off the golden poison dart frog, the largest species of dart frog, is enough to kill a human.
Wow. Yeah, that's considering how small the frog is to begin with, that's incredible.
Yes, they are incredibly lethal. In fact, making them more toxic than some of the most toxic snake venoms on the planet. It's about 200 times more potent than something like an inland taipan. So obviously an inland taipan is going to have to bite you to envenomate you. This, you'd have to secrete the toxin somehow, either onto your mucous membranes or to your skin. It's even been said that there's the possibility it could be absorbed through your sweat glands. Yeah. So pretty lethal stuff, which is why what I'll tell you about in a minute is even more insane. So
I think you're going to answer a question I have then.
So batrachotoxin on the skin of these frogs is has enough potency as well to kill about 20,000 mice easily if you were to use it. So I mean, I don't know who's been rubbing frogs on mice, but
if you're into mouse genocide.
Yep. And they're, in fact, this is the species that is most often used by indigenous people in South America to hunt with, to make the classic blow dart.
Okay.
So
I didn't know that. I always wondered, is that where they got the dart part of the name from? And
so traditionally what would happen is you would capture some of the golden dart frogs, and you basically rub them on the end of your dart, and then you put it in your blow dart and then fire it at a monkey or a bird, and it drops it pretty quickly.
So what, do they have to grip, like use a leaf or something to grip it?
I assume so. I've not gone too far into how to do things like that, but
that in itself is so interesting in terms of natural history and for human history, because you're telling us that from South America, tribe people are using the secretions of a frog to lace the darts.
Yeah.
Where I've been in Malaysia, they use the sap from a specific tree.
Is it known as curare?
It's not curare, no.
No, very similar, I'm guessing, because actually, interestingly enough, most of these tribes of people don't actually use poison dart frogs. They use the curare plant.
Oh, right. Okay.
Although curare is basically a name that's given to a variety of different incredibly toxic plants that are used in exactly the same way. And as you could probably guess, a plant isn't going to move, but frogs do.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to go and get that.
But
But
to harvest.
making use of both, that is essentially where the name poison dart frog comes from, is because these guys were used to make poison darts.
That's really cool.
So how do these frogs become so toxic? It's actually through a really interesting way, because interestingly enough, I've held a poison dart frog. I've held a few of them,
right, yeah.
and I'm still here. You know, how have I managed this incredibly insane stunt? And I can tell you now that there are loads of zookeepers and private keepers of these frogs, because they are very popular in the pet trade.
Yes, that's why I wanted to ask you. Because again, I love poison dart frogs. I know nothing about them though. Nothing. How do you keep them as a pet? Because they're so
not end up dead.
Kept. Yeah, they're so commonly kept, and especially in a place like Britain, like and America, I'd say, as well, the US. Like, how do people, and Australia, I have to say too, how do people keep these as pets and not like?
Very simple.
Cark it.
Don't feed them a wild diet, because in the wild, that's where these guys get their food from. So they actually eat poisonous species of insects and arthropods.
Right. It's complete. So they're not born with it.
Nope.
They haven't evolved with it. It's just their diet.
Oh no, they've evolved with it. They have.
No, but what I mean is they haven't evolved to produce it themselves.
Yeah. So most species of venomous creature can produce venom themselves and can actually make it in their body. These guys have to ingest it to allow it to build up within their body. They can actually alter some of the chemicals inside of their body to make them more lethal from what they're eating, but they actually have to ingest that food. So they will be eating poisonous species of arthropods, which themselves will be eating poisonous plants. So through a process known as sequestration, they basically take in these toxins and build them up inside of their body in the same way that biomagnification works. So you end up with a frog eating, say, 50 beetles. Themselves, those beetles will be eating, say, 50 amounts of plants, and they're building up all that toxin as they go further up the food chain.
For two examples that you might hear pretty much every day, there's carbon sequestering, such as in like moss or peat or something like that, or mercury sequestering in where, you know, like out in the Pacific, the small kind of bottom dwellers feed on these things that are irradiated with mercury, and it builds up and up and up, and then you get
a whale
that are full of mercury.
I'm waiting for the metallic whales. You know, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it goes up the food chain. But in captivity, we don't go out and capture poisonous beetles. You feed them fruit fly or grain weevils or the very most termites and things like that. So their diet is completely harmless. So you can, in theory, touch a poison dart frog and not die. So that's pretty much where that comes from. Is their is how they get that.
That's fascinating.
Now, there has been a few cases of them confirming exact species, and it seems to be two different species that prefer, you know, different species of toxic arthropods. So yeah, it's really cool.
That is really cool. Yeah. Venoms and toxins, should I say, because it's venoms and poisons. They're always just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
When I do snakes, I love to break down like all the chemicals and how they affect the body, because it's grotesque, but it is fascinating.
It is what gets you, I suppose. So although dart frogs, as a family of frogs, are known for their toxins, few studies have actually described the symptoms on humans being poisoned. And that's mostly because no one has ever died from a poisoned dart frog, as far as we know.
Okay.
I mean, I think it would require someone to be darted with a dart of, you know, someone hunting them, I guess. Cue Ace Ventura with the poison darts.
3 darts is too much.
But yeah, there hasn't been a confirmed death by poison dart frog. Thankfully, no one's been that stupid to go out and lick one or something like that. But you'd know about it very quickly because you'd be dead very quickly. But there is actually a case where 2 humans were actually poisoned. by dart frogs. So 2 photographers were handling Dendrobates tinctorius dart frogs in Brazil, and that is the dying eye poison dart frog, a lovely blue and yellow color species.
Okay.
So the incident occurred on the 4th of August in 2013 at about 11:40 a.m. near the city of Monte Dourado, Para, Brazil. 2 photographers, one 47 and one 30 years old, were walking on a trail when one of them spotted a blue dart frog next to a tree trunk. Even though they identified the frog correctly, so these guys knew what dart frogs were, presumably they also knew that they were called poison dart frogs, they decided to hold the frog so that they could photograph it better. The first photographer quickly captured the frog and held it for about 5 seconds in his own hand before releasing it and washing his hands in a nearby stream. The photographer kept the frog from moving away by placing both of his hands on top of it. However, 20 minutes after they first contacted the frog, the photographer who had handled it initially began to feel numbness in his right arm, mainly at the height of the forearm. The other photographer, who after taking photos had touched his mouth without first washing his hands, felt numbness in his lower lip.
Right.
Now, the pair reported that they didn't bother seeking medical attention because the numbness was mild. And after about 40 minutes, they apparently felt they no longer felt symptoms. This shows the potency of their toxin from just mere contact, giving them, a numbness throughout their body. But they may have been incredibly lucky because there is some studies that have been done into the amount of toxin that these frogs can produce. And sometimes you find that some individuals produce less than others, and younger individuals, for instance, may not produce as much as older individuals. So they may have ended up, messing around and finding out if they hadn't been incredibly lucky like this.
Yikes.
So there's
those people that pick up the blue ringed octopus.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's your lesson for today. Don't pick up something with poison in the name. So breeding of these frogs is also something that's really cool because they're slightly different from a lot of the frogs. Most people think of frogs and they just think of them just being in a pool, making frog spawn. That's it. That's what most of us are somewhat familiar with because it's usually common species of frogs that tend to do that.
Yeah.
But these frogs have a unique reproductive habit. The males perform an elaborate courtship dance to attract females. Usually more than one female will respond to a male's calls, and they are loud calls for such a tiny frog. They are really, really loud. So you hear them, if you were to walk into the rainforest, you would hear these guys calling. So usually more than one female will respond to a male's call and will fight aggressively until there is a winner. Now, the victorious female will then rub her front legs against the male's snout and back, and then he'll go somewhere with her to secluded to mate. She'll lay her eggs on the forest floor in usually a small little pool of water, nothing too deep, just enough that the eggs are kept, moist and everything. In fact, in captivity, a lot of the time, they're usually kept in petri dishes because that's a nice depth of water. After they hatch out and the tadpoles start moving around, the male, who's been guarding the eggs up to this point as well and keeping them moist and keeping them protected, he will actually take the tadpoles on his back one by one up into the canopy, up to a water source, usually a bromeliad or another epiphyte high up in the trees, where they'll develop in those little pools into froglets. Think of it like a kiddie pool for tadpoles.
Yeah.
They're in there, and you would think, well, there's no food for them. What's going on? There is enough mosquito larvae and small insects that basically fall into these pools that the tadpoles can grow, and then eventually, when they get big enough, they hop out.
That's cool. That's really, really cool.
It's an absolutely stunning and amazing way of protecting and sort of dotting their offspring around, making sure that they're not all in one place.
Yeah.
So obviously, with any animal that we talk about, sadly, with any animal that we seem to talk about, we have to think about the conservation aspect of it, but also more so for animals that are in the rainforest, because these animals are under multiple threats. But since dart frogs, thankfully, are quite popular in the pet trade, I say thankfully because they're also easy to breed in captivity, relatively compared to some other species. The selling price on a lot of them has actually plummeted over the years, certainly in places like the UK, Europe, North America, where they're normally kept. And that's meant that species like the bumblebee dart frog, Dendrobates leucomalus, are abundant in the pet trade.
That's the one you see the most of. At least that's the one I've seen the most of in the pet trade.
Thankfully, most of these frogs are actually relatively easy to get your hands on in the pet trade since around the 1980s, 1990s. However, there have been there hasn't been thorough monitoring in a lot of the ranges where you will find dart frogs all across Central and South America to basically determine current statuses for some of them in individual smaller areas from the wild. And dart frogs, unfortunately, are still taken from the wild in some of these places illegally and sometimes legally, and can be exploited for the pet trade, which there isn't really a need to with a lot of these species because they can be bred in captivity. And it's just a case of people having to pay more for people who've put in the time and the effort to breed an animal like this.
Yeah.
Exactly the same with tokay geckos. So they can be over harvested from some areas. This has led to declines in some areas in habitat, and also from habitat destruction, and also climate change, which has threatened where these guys live.
Yeah, isn't that including that fungal infection?
And chytrid fungus, that's definitely affected a lot of things.
That's been made worse by the climate change.
Yes. Interestingly as well, a knock-on effect. So things like the strawberry poison dart frog, which is a lovely red-colored frog that looks like it's got a little pair of jeans on, because of that lovely sort of blue color on its underside.
Yeah.
They actually eat a type of mite. Now, we don't fully know the diets of all of these different dart frogs, but there's probably a good chance they're controlling certain invertebrates that may cause damage to other parts of the rainforest. So just as with everything, they play an important role in controlling numbers of other species that could go out of whack if they were to disappear. So, it's a knock-on effect. If we lose these really beautiful, charismatic little frogs, we could see huge impacts in parts of the rainforest that we didn't even think would happen. So some of the most threatened subspecies and species of dart frogs include the Oxapampa poison dart frog, which is critically endangered and is only found in a single location in Peru. Basically, timber harvesting has threatened their existence and almost wiped them out. The black-legged poison dart frog, which is also endangered and mostly threatened by agriculture and mining and runoff. Where have we heard that going on before as well? The sky blue poison dart frog, which is also endangered, living in caves and forests of Peru. In only its two main threats are overhunting for exploitation and agriculture that are basically destroying its habitat. And the Bohemese poison dart frog, which is also found in areas of Bolivian wetlands, which are under threat from farming, livestock, and draining of those areas. So yeah, unfortunately, a lot of those frogs have basically been pushed to the edge. So we don't want to see that get any worse. Thankfully, though, zoos all over the world are conserving and breeding these animals incredibly well, and it's to that point I wanted to end on. I put a shout out on, I don't know whether you saw it on various
Zoo
different
Creepers.
on various different Facebook pages to contact the zookeeping community, and they did not disappoint. A lot of the images that you've been seeing coming up throughout this creature feature have come directly from keepers at different collections all around the world, who were kind enough when I asked, does anyone want to share their pictures of their poison dart frogs to throw into this creature feature? And I got loads back, which was really, really nice. So a massive thank you to all of you people who sent in images to us. to use in this week's episode. It was really, really nice, and I had some nice conversations with some of you out there to basically say thank you very much for sending us that footage. It's been a real pleasure to actually look through some of those little clips and everything, and I'm going to have fun when I'm editing this to try and obviously fit them into the episode. So I'm hoping it's filled through nicely, because it should do.
I think from what I saw I haven't seen all of them, but from what I saw of the responses you've got, plus the responses I got a little while back for one of my creature features, I feel that will be an avenue that I certainly will pursue more as well. Get in contact with our our extended colleagues.
It does make you feel good to know that you say you put out a question to the zookeeping community, and the responses that we got back were quite good. So a massive thank you to all of you. But yeah, that pretty much brings us to the end of Dart Frogs and everything. So we move on into our emails for this week?
Yeah, we can hop into it.
No.
Bing! You've got mail. Ooh, it's an email.
Right, well, we're into this week's emails. And, well, the question from last week, which was, what is your favourite ice-aged animal? We had no responses on Facebook. I was a little bit shocked by that. So we did get one response, though. Aaron, you got one on YouTube.
We did get one on YouTube, and it comes to us from Rosalie9961, and they've said, with this week's question of which ice ages animal is the best and why, well, I'm going to be shadowing some of Aaron's feelings.
Oh, no wonder you like this answer.
Yeah, I do like this answer with these type of fauna. It's a bit of a toss-up for me, so I'll be a little cheeky and say both. I have a deep love for the Colombian mammoth.
Nice.
That's a cool animal. Yeah, another proboscidean. I do like those. Just a mountain of a creature that once roamed North America. Also, something that I love and makes me a bit sad to think about is that around 30,000 years ago, every continent minus Australia/Oceania and Antarctica had a proboscidean, and that's correct. In this time period, that's insane to think about. Because we no longer have, even in Devon, we have evidence of these
Paleoloxodon.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite prehistoric elephant.
That's one question we haven't answered. We've asked what are the favorite out of the 3 extant ones, but we never said what is your favorite of the entire family.
I think it would mostly come down to mammoths.
I think most people would say mammoth or African elephant, I reckon. Yeah. So yeah, where were we? So I very much love the Colombian mammoth. I also have to give a huge shout out to the Mecharodonts. Good stuff. From today's star Homotherium to the iconic Smilodon, which, by the way, if you like Smilodon and you've I don't know how long you've been following along with us, we did cover Smilodon. So give that one a listen or a watch, because Smilodon is a cool creature. I don't think that's on YouTube.
No, it's not.
That one you can find on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts.
But you can also find another saber-toothed creature on our YouTube playlist, which is the Thylacosmilus.
That's correct. Yeah, although not a Mecharodon.
No,
but still worth a listen.
Sparacidon, but just as cool.
Definitely just as cool. So yeah, she finishes. These are creatures that just scream with strength and beauty. I agree, but also sort of a poetic sense about the fragility of their mighty sabers. Yes. Yeah. That's a hell of an answer too, considering we didn't get any answers on Facebook.
Oh,
if this is the one answer, this is a good answer. Not just because it agrees with my biases.
Not just because it completely agrees with everything I say, but some other reason.
It's for once it's not lonely being right, but it's very well described, very well worded. Yeah. So thank you for your comment, and thank you for agreeing with me, because it just lends more credibility to it.
Well, hopefully we'll get more answers for this week's question, which is, what's your favorite frog species? I figured that's probably just a nice, easy one to go with. Aaron, what's your favorite frog species?
When we say frogs, are we Are we
All
just frogs
frogs.
or toads too?
All toads are frogs.
Yeah, I know, but I wondered how
I'll let you have
specific you're
toads.
being. It doesn't matter because my favourite's a frog anyway.
Oh, well, then what?
I was just making sure that we're all clear, we're all on the same page. I think it has to be, despite the fact that until this creature feature, I genuinely knew nothing about them.
Mm.
It's going to have to be the bumblebee dart frog.
Ah.
I've always enjoyed seeing them in zoological collections. They always, despite the fact like I'm surrounded by snakes, I always gravitate towards the poison dart frog enclosure. And I've seen a few where there's a mixture of different poison dart frog species in there, and they are all so beautiful. I do agree with you that blue dart frog is a stunner and probably more beautiful, but there's something about the bumblebee dart frog that is more striking. I like the I've always imagined having a small group of bumblebee dart frogs, and I always wanted to call one Savage. Do you want? I take you laugh because you get it. Yeah, okay. I did thought like
you'd be better getting horned frogs, surely.
Savage a press, or two Savage and a press. Yeah. For those of you who don't follow Star Wars, it's Darth Maul's brother from Star Wars.
His brother from another mother.
Yeah. I'd yellow bumblebee dart frog. And you?
Hang on. Speak of the devil.
Oh, this is live.
We'll include this.
Yeah.
Just literally as we were talking about this, our very own Drew has just messaged
that's
me
wonderful.
This picture, which is now up on the screen, which is of the blue poison dart frog.
His artwork, it just never ever disappoints.
This is actually one of the best ones. It's going to be hard to
really good.
It's going to be hard not to pick that one in future for things. Sorry about that, folks, but we had to show you that. Not sorry. It kind of answers what Drew's question, what Drew's favorite one is, which is clearly
Is it that?
I don't know.
Oh, right.
But I know that he's probably going to be along the same lines as me, in the same thought of there's too many to pick. He
likes his amphibians.
I like amphibians as well, and there are too many really nice frogs to pick. I like a white tree frog because they're so derpy and wonderfully fun to deal with.
I've worked with them more than any other amphibian.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, every collection that I've worked with, where I've worked with them, there's always been one called Yoda. And I've
never worked with one called Yoda.
No, well, that means that one of the ones I've worked with wasn't called Yoda. So that's a breath of fresh air. I know I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but it got to the point where it's like, okay, this is a little unoriginal.
My two were Nimbin and Malulabar. After 2 parts of Queensland. I quite like a horned frog because just they are little mouths that just eat everything. Corroboree frogs from Australia, which are basically Australia's answer to the poison dart frog, because they are black and yellow, but black and yellow striped.
Pac-Man frogs are cool.
Yeah, they're quite cool. You've also got the sort of the larger end of things, the African bullfrog as well, but it's so hard to pick an individual. I quite like fire-bellied toads as well.
Oh yeah.
They're all really pretty frogs, and mossy frogs as well. They're so beautiful in the whether they sort of blend in with things. You'd never see them if you're walking through the forest. And I suppose you've got to throw in there as well the little rain frogs that everyone like the Namakwa desert frogs, and the ones that will basically spend most of their life underground and then come out. The ones that you've probably seen of little videos of them making sort of a squeaking sound to terrify things, because they're clearly that terrifying. But I'm going to go with the blue poison dart frog, I think, if I had to pick a simple answer, because they are so pretty.
Special shout out to the Chazwazza.
Yes, the Chazwazza. It's what we called them in Australia. Chaswas.
Such a good episode of Simpsons.
Yeah, let us know what your favorite kind of frog is in the comments, either on our Facebook page where that will go up, or over on our YouTube page below the video that you're currently watching. Yeah, let us know what your favorite frog is. It might be the Chaswazzy, you never know.
I wonder if anyone's actually going to get the two references, the Savage Press and Simpsons.
There'll be a few
references.
people out there. There is a Venn diagram where all those things connect over. So that's one of many ways that you can get in contact with us. You can also send us an email if you want to. That's over on our email address, which is the nathistorykupboard@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any emails this week?
We have two.
Oh,
yeah.
Fire the email cannon.
So
we don't have a cannon, but fine.
The first email comes to us from one of our Patreon supporters, actually, from Jen Greenhall, who says, hello, lovelies. Just done the RSPB Birdwatch, which was last
Big
weekend.
Garden Birdwatch, yeah. That was actually one of my plans. I didn't get a chance to do it, though. No.
Well, the storm was pretty horrific as well, wasn't it? Yeah. She says, we usually have so many different species, it's remarkable, and they are frequent visitors too. However, a flipping sparrowhawk turned up and sat on the wall under the feeders for about 5 minutes and totally put everyone off for quite a while. He was lovely to see, and that was the species seen during the observation, so I can't complain. And according to the RSPB, we are slightly better than the national average. The sparrowhawk visit made me wonder, though, is there an average time for different species to return to a location after a predator has left? I guess there are lots of variables to factor into this, but it did make me wonder. Keep up the good work. Off the top of my head, I don't know is the honest answer.
No, I wouldn't have a clue on that one either.
I will have
an interesting study.
Yeah, I'll have a look. I can't. I think it would depend on variables. I also reckon it depends species to species and social structure to social structure.
Yeah,
something that is solitary probably won't return,
and
as
also
quick as something.
amount and frequency. If it does it all the time, probably less likely to come back to it.
Yeah.
But
that's an interesting one. We don't know the answer. We'll have a look into it.
I like the fact that that's the bit that you got to record. So that may have been annoying in that it ruined your amount of species data, but you got one really cool species in your data, which, that's it's a result. Is a result. So,
yeah, a very cool result. Yeah. And then the second one comes to us from someone we've not heard from before. So this one comes to us from Christopher Ackerson, and I hope I've pronounced your name properly there. But he says, "Hello, gentlemen. I wanted."
That's very posh.
Yeah. Never been accused of that before.
Hello.
I wanted to write to state my appreciation for your excellent show.
Thank you.
By the way, I promise I haven't written this and sent this in. I wanted to write to state my appreciation for your excellent show. I've been a fan for about 2 years now, but I have not written in until now. I've enjoyed and learned quite a bit more about the natural world thanks to it. I also have enjoyed exploring the books, media, and links to your interviewees as well. I just finished Big Cats and Their Fossil Relatives.
Hey.
Okay, I promise I haven't written this.
Yeah, this is sounding dodgier by the second.
That's really cool, by the way. So thank you for the recommendation. To answer the question from the last show, I would love to either explore the Namib Desert in Namibia,
that's cool,
or the Atacama Desert in Chile. Both are spectacularly beautiful. I'm also curious to see a fog oasis like the one that comes off the Red Sea into Egypt's coast. There are so many interesting deserts to see. I grew up in the Sonoran Desert, but don't live there now. I had to show my partner Southern Arizona, and she was fascinated by the saguaro cacti so much that we had to stop the car so she could go look and take pictures of them. I look forward to enjoying more episodes and content. On that subject, I also wanted to say that the best questions I've heard you answer are the questions which came from your viewers' children. Yes, I think I agree. I'm a former teacher, and I can state that kids ask the most interesting questions.
Yeah, that's true.
I used to do geology shows for my class, and the kids loved it. You might be able to survey a local school about their students' questions about natural history, animals, and similar subjects. It could be a rich source of good content. Just a thought. I will continue to listen. I'm also eyeing some of your very cool T-shirts from the Teemill store.
Thank you very
you
much.
and kind regards, Chris Axon.
Hmm.
What a lovely email.
Mm.
So thank you very much for your email, Christopher. Also, you're very welcome for the book recommendations. I'm especially chuffed that you read Big Cats and the Foster Relatives. It sounds like you read that just in time for the release
Mecharodon.
of the Mecharodon episode that just came out. So you'll be able to follow along with some of the stuff we spoke about, which is really cool. And if anyone hasn't read that book, Big Cats and Their Foster Relatives, I've probably referred to it in almost every cat.
I think, we've certainly talked about it. It's a really good book, though.
I think he mentioned that that one might have been from when we were doing book
Smilodon?
recommendations.
Oh God, that's gone back quite a while.
But yes, fantastic book. Read it if you're interested in any of the cats.
And then there's the dog version.
There
as
is,
well.
which neither of us have read yet.
No,
but I do intend.
It's on my list of things to do, to read, to have spare time at some point.
Also, his answer about which desert he'd like to spend time in.
Namib's
really
cool.
nice answers there. I've never seen those cacti in person, but
they're the big
ones,
ones that you think of, your stereotypical sort of fat cactus,
the ones that are in all the Wile E. Coyote cartoons. Which fantastic cartoons they are.
Highly accurate, of course.
Highly accurate, neep neep and all that. But
meep, meep.
I like his idea about surveying some local schools. I might give that a look, see how that works.
Don't go hanging around the local school. That looks weird.
No, email.
Hi kids, can I ask you a question?
I know that one of our Patreon supporters, I don't know if she'll want to be named for this, so I won't, but I know one of our Patreon supporters likes when we do creature features that where we do like a path and there's options, and it always ends up with Gareth dying. And she wondered if we could put that into paper form that then schools could use. So maybe there is something in what Christopher and our Patreon supporter.
Well, that's one fantastic email there, and one way that you can definitely get in contact with us is through our email. But as Aaron was mentioning, some of our lovely Patreon viewers and listeners, that is another way that you can get in contact with us, is through our Patreon, which let's hear about that now.
Every week, we like to give a little love back by shouting out the names of our wonderful Patreon supporters.
That's right. These are the cupboard dwellers who are kind enough to support us through a monetary contribution, for which we are eternally grateful and grateful beyond words.
And those people are, of course, Fogtober, Jen Greenhall, Connie P, Chelsea McKee, Nick to Nick, and Matt Geddy.
Guys, your financial contributions are actively helping us out here in the Natural History Cupboard in a myriad of ways, including developing our new studio, planning excursions and being able to go out and film on location, considering technical upgrades, and actually making the jump from a solely audio-based podcast to the now growing YouTube channel. And we really can't thank you enough for that.
Now, we appreciate all of our cupboard dwellers and the support you offer us through listening, liking, sharing, and subscribing. But if you feel we've earned it and you're considering joining our Patreon, there are two options through which you can do so.
That's the Nature Nerds and the Animal Ambassador tiers, which you can find on the Patreon website, or links through our social media as well. And each one having different benefits for you to enjoy.
And now back to Gareth and Aaron in the studio.
And thank you us for saying that. But also a big thank you to ONC, our new Patreon as well. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's episode. So massive thank you, Aaron.
No, thank you. Yeah, all good.
And a massive thank you to you at home for joining us. And we'll see you next time here in the Natural History Cupboard. Bye.
Ribbit.
So, Aaron, here's my joke for you.
Right.
What does a frog order at a restaurant?
What does a frog order at a restaurant? I don't know. What does a frog order at a restaurant?
French flies and a Diet Coke.
Oh.